I never thought I'd be that guy. You know the one. The unsuspecting husband who finds out his life is built on lies. My name is Daniel Hayes, and until 6 months ago, I was living what I thought was a pretty decent life. I'm 42, a dedicated high school chemistry teacher with a passion for nurturing young scientific minds. My students often placed in regional competitions, and I took pride in their accomplishments. I owned a modest 3-bedroom home in Lakeside with Rachel, my wife of 15 years, and our life seemed comfortable, normal. That Friday in October started like any other. The maple trees outside our bedroom window had just begun their annual transformation, painting our neighborhood in hues of amber and crimson. I sat on our bed, a stack of half-graded lab reports beside me, watching as Rachel meticulously packed her suitcase. "Are you sure you have everything for the conference?" I asked, glancing up from a particularly creative hypothesis from one of my sophomore students. Rachel nodded, tucking a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear. "I think so. 5 days in Denver is a long time, but these regional marketing summits are crucial for networking." She worked as a marketing director for a pharmaceutical company, a job that occasionally required travel. I noticed her carefully wrapping her favorite emerald silk nightgown in tissue paper before placing it in her suitcase. She'd bought it during our 10th anniversary trip to San Francisco, but had rarely worn it since. Next came the small crystal bottle of Chanel No. 5, the expensive perfume she saved for special occasions. Something in my chest tightened. Rachel shrugged without meeting my eyes. "I might have some business dinners. Besides, it's nice to feel good about yourself when you're away from home." I nodded, swallowing the strange discomfort rising in my throat. We'd been distant lately, busy with work, tired in the evenings, perfunctory in our affections. But that was normal for long-term marriages, wasn't it? The passion ebbs and flows. That's what everyone says. Rakus sale biapra. After Rachel left for the airport, I threw myself into grading papers and preparing Monday's lab demonstration on catalytic reactions. The house felt oddly silent without her presence. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check the guest list at the Ridgeline Hotel." I stared at the message, my heart drumming against my ribs. Who would send something like this? A prank? A wrong number? I deleted it immediately, angry at the intrusion. But the seed was planted. The message nagged at the edges of my consciousness as I tried to focus on work. By midnight, I found myself opening Rachel's laptop, something I'd never done before. She'd always been protective of her privacy, and I'd always respected that. But now, her password was still my birthday. That should have reassured me, but somehow it didn't. I hesitated before clicking on her calendar. According to her schedule, she was attending the Denver Marketing Summit from Friday through Wednesday. But there was something else. A small entry tucked into Monday's schedule. B&D project meeting. My fingers moved mechanically, opening her email next. Nothing suspicious in the inbox. I checked her sent folder, mostly work correspondence, a few messages to her sister about Christmas plans, nothing unusual. Then I noticed a folder labeled Projects and clicked it open. The most recent email chain was with someone named Brian. The subject line read, our special project. "Can't wait for our time together at Ridgeline. Rooms booked under my name this time. Looking forward to continuing where we left off last month." The room tilted sideways. My lungs seized as if I'd been plunged into icy water. This couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. A work project, something I misunderstood. With trembling hands, Vanessa opened the folder and began to scan its contents. I watched her expression shift from disbelief to shock to devastation as the evidence mounted before her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered. The weekends he said he was at business retreats. The late-night calls he'd taken in another room. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why are you showing me this? Why not just anonymously send it to me?" "Because I wanted you to know you're not alone in this," I replied honestly. "And because I believe we deserve better than to be collateral damage in their affair. That we ensure they face the consequences of their actions," I said, leaning forward. "Not out of petty revenge, but because people who betray those who love and trust them shouldn't get to simply walk away unscathed." Vanessa closed the folder, her composure remarkable despite the bombshell I just dropped on her life. "What did you have in mind?" We spent the next 2 hours outlining a coordinated response that would ensure both Rachel and Brian would face professional and personal repercussions for their deception. Vanessa, I discovered, was not only Brian's fiancée, but also the daughter of the CEO at his company. The family connection was why he'd been so reluctant to end their engagement despite his affair with Rachel. "He's due for a promotion next month," she said, her voice hardening as she processed her pain. "A position my father created specifically for him. That's not happening now." By the time we parted, we had a comprehensive plan. Vanessa would confront Brian privately, but strategically. After certain professional dominoes had already begun to fall, I would handle the Rachel side of the equation with equal precision. "Daniel," Vanessa said as we stood to leave, "thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy for you, either." "You too," she replied. "And Daniel? We deserve better than what they did to us. Remember that." As I drove home, her words echoed in my mind. We deserve better. It had been a long time since I'd really believed that about myself, that I deserved better than to be deceived, better than to be taken for granted. But now, the conviction grew stronger with each mile. The next morning marked the beginning of what I had come to think of as Accountability Week. I started by sending carefully selected evidence of the affair to Brian's direct supervisor at the pharmaceutical company, focusing particularly on emails that indicated he had shared proprietary company information with Rachel during their relationship. I didn't explicitly mention the affair, just expressed concern about potential ethical breaches I discovered through my wife's account. Next, I contacted the Ridgeline Hotel's management, requesting itemized receipts for Brian Donovan's stay, which I knew included expensive meals and spa treatments charged to his corporate card. These two found their way to his company's expense compliance department with a note about possible misuse of company funds. For Rachel's part, I called a meeting with our financial advisor, initiating the process to separate our accounts and assets. I also consulted a divorce attorney, laying the groundwork for what would likely be necessary. The attorney assured me that Rachel's infidelity would be relevant in our no-fault state when it came to division of assets, especially since she had spent considerable sums of our money financing aspects of her affair. "Document everything," he advised me, "and don't move out of the house, whatever you do. That can complicate property claims later." On Wednesday, Rachel texted asking if we could talk. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a park near our neighborhood, where we used to walk our dog before he passed away 2 years ago. She was already seated on a bench when I arrived, looking smaller somehow, diminished. She'd lost weight in the week since Aspen, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between us. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about what happened with Brian, about how we got here. And I miss you," she said, her voice cracking. "I miss our life together. I know I've destroyed your trust, but I want to try to rebuild it, to see if there's anything left to save between us." I studied her face, searching for sincerity, for the woman I had loved for so many years. "Why now? Is it because Brian broke things off?" Rachel looked away, embarrassed. "Yes, he ended it. After you confronted us. He said it was too complicated, too messy." "So I'm your second choice," I said flatly. "Your backup plan now that your lover has discarded you." "No, it's not like that," she protested. "This situation has forced me to really look at what I was doing, at what I was risking. I never stopped loving you, Daniel. I just lost my way." She winced at my bluntness. "I deserve that. I deserve all your anger. But I'm asking you, begging you, to consider whether there might be a path forward for us. We have 15 years together. That has to count for something." I looked out across the park, watching the young couple push their toddler on a swing, their faces alight with the simple joy of family. Rachel and I had discussed having children early in our marriage, but ultimately decided against it, focusing instead on our careers. I wondered now how different our lives might have been with a child to bind us together. Heltahu. Heltahu. Heltahu, I said finally, and I need you to be completely honest. If I hadn't discovered the affair, if I hadn't shown up in Aspen, would you have ended it with Brian, or would you have continued deceiving me indefinitely? Rachel's hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. I don't know. I was so caught up in the excitement, in the escape from our routine. I wasn't thinking about the future. "That's what I thought," I said, rising from the bench. "You didn't choose to end the affair, Rachel. You didn't choose me." You're only here because your other option disappeared. Daniel, please. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I made a terrible mistake. People make mistakes. Marriages survive affairs all the time. Some do, I acknowledged. But those are marriages where the cheating spouse comes clean voluntarily, where they choose to recommit to the relationship on their own. You didn't. You got caught, and now you're scrambling because Plan A fell through. Tears spilled down her cheeks. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to fix this. I don't know if you can, I said honestly. But at minimum, you can start by giving me space while I figure out what I want, and by being completely transparent about everything going forward. And you should know, I added, I've consulted a divorce attorney. I haven't filed yet, but I'm prepared to if that's what I decide is best for me. Quickly, I laughed without humor. Rachel, you spent a year lying to my face every day. You don't get to dictate the timeline of my decisions now. As I walked away, leaving her weeping on the bench, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and strength. The man I had been just weeks ago would have crumbled at her tears, would have rushed to comfort her despite her betrayal. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood his own worth. Thursday brought the first major development in our plan. Vanessa called to inform me that Brian had been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into his expense reports and potential confidentiality breaches. His promotion had been indefinitely postponed. My father is furious, she said, not just about the professional impropriety, but about what Brian did to me, to us. He suspects something, but he can't prove anything. He keeps asking me if I've talked to you, but I've played dumb, just like we discussed. There was a grim satisfaction in her voice. The board meets next week to review his case. It doesn't look good for him. I returned his ring last night, she said. Told him I'd known about Rachel for weeks and had just been gathering evidence. The look on his face. She paused. It didn't fix anything, didn't heal the hurt, but it felt good to see him realize he's not as clever as he thought. Later that day, I received an unexpected call from Rachel's boss at the pharmaceutical company. Dr. Hayes, this is Kenneth Warren, Rachel's director at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I hope you don't mind me contacting you directly. I'm calling about some concerning information that's come to light regarding potential conflicts of interest involving Rachel and a competitor's employee. Before we proceed with any formal action, I wanted to confirm a few details with you. I answered his questions truthfully but without elaboration, confirming only what I knew for certain about Rachel's relationship with Brian. By the end of the conversation, it was clear that Rachel's professional reputation was in serious jeopardy. Thank you for your candor, Kenneth said. I should tell you that we take these ethical breaches very seriously at Meridian. There will likely be consequences for Rachel's position with us. I understand, I replied. I appreciate your thoroughness in investigating the matter. That evening, Rachel called in a panic. Daniel, did you talk to my boss? Did you tell them about Brian? I answered questions truthfully when asked. I replied calmly. Just as you should have done. They're launching a formal ethics investigation. I could lose my job. Her voice was shrill with fear and accusation. How could you do this to me? I didn't do anything to you, Rachel. These are the natural consequences of your choices. You chose to have an affair with a competitor's executive. You chose to potentially compromise confidential information in the process. Then you have nothing to worry about from the investigation, I pointed out. But maybe this is a good opportunity for you to experience what honesty and accountability feel like. They're quite different from deception and evasion. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of our home, my home now, really, and reflected on the events of the past week. The scales of justice were beginning to balance. Rachel and Brian were facing professional repercussions for their ethical lapses. Their deception was being exposed in ways that wouldn't simply be forgotten or dismissed. But as I looked around at the photographs still hanging on our walls, Rachel and me in happier times, smiling, connected, in love, I wondered if any of this would actually heal the wound of betrayal. Would making them suffer restore what I had lost? Or was I just postponing my own process of grieving and recovery? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time since discovering Rachel's affair, I felt something other than pain and anger. I felt the stirrings of something that resembled power, not over Rachel or Brian, but over my own life and future. Whatever came next would be my choice, not a reaction to their betrayal. The final phase of my plan commenced on Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after my world imploded in Aspen. I had invited both Rachel and Brian to meet me at the same upscale restaurant where he had planned to dine with my wife the night I confronted them. Rachel had agreed readily, perhaps seeing it as an opportunity for reconciliation. Brian had been more reluctant, but eventually acquiesced after I hinted that the meeting could potentially help mitigate some of his current professional difficulties. I arrived early, selecting a table with deliberate care, private enough for our conversation to remain relatively contained, but positioned where management could intervene if necessary. The maitre d' recognized me from my previous unexpected appearance, and raised an eyebrow but made no comment as he led me to my chosen spot. At precisely 7 p.m., Rachel arrived, looking nervous but hopeful in a modest black dress. Her face fell visibly when she saw the table was set for 3. "What is this, Daniel?" she asked as she slid reluctantly into the chair opposite me. "Who else is coming?" Before I could answer, Brian appeared, stopping short when he spotted Rachel. His face hardened as he realized he'd been manipulated. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I called after him, just loudly enough to be heard. "Not if you want any chance of salvaging your career." "This is a conversation," I corrected him. "One that's long overdue. Please, join us." After a moment's calculation, Brian took the remaining seat, maintaining as much distance from Rachel as the table allowed. The tension between them was palpable. Former lovers now reduced to awkward strangers, bound by mutual disgrace. "Why are we here?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "What is this about?" "Closure," I replied simply. "For all of us." I gestured to the waiter, who approached immediately. "Would either of you care for a drink? This might be easier with a little social lubricant." They both ordered, Rachel a glass of Chardonnay, Brian a scotch. I requested sparkling water. I needed complete clarity for what was coming next. When our drinks arrived, I raised my glass in a mock toast. To honesty. Something that's been in short supply until recently. Neither of them joined my toast, but both took substantial swallows of their drinks. "Let me be direct," I continued. "The past 2 weeks have been instructive for all of us, I think. You've both learned that actions have consequences. Professional consequences, personal consequences, financial consequences." I looked directly at Brian. "Your promotion is gone. Your engagement is over. Your reputation is compromised." Then I turned to Rachel. "And you're facing an ethics investigation, potential termination, and divorce." "Is that why we're here?" Brian demanded. "So you can gloat about the havoc you've wreaked in our lives? Are you enjoying your revenge?" "This isn't about revenge," I said calmly. "It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that you both understand exactly what you did and what it cost. Not just me, but Vanessa, your colleagues, everyone who trusted you." Rachel looked close to tears. "Daniel, please, I know I hurt you terribly. I've admitted that. I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" "I want you to stop seeing yourself as the victim here," I replied. "Both of you chose to engage in an affair. You chose to lie repeatedly to the people who loved and trusted you. And now you're facing the natural consequences of those choices." "So what happens now?" Brian asked warily. "What's the purpose of this little gathering?" I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew 2 sealed envelopes, placing one in front of each of them. Inside each envelope is a document outlining what I know about your affair. Dates, locations, communications, expenses, everything. Also included, I continued, is a personal statement from me detailing the emotional and financial impact of your betrayal. I've had similar documents prepared for Vanessa Loring, for both your employers, and for our families. "Not at all. I'm offering you a choice." I leaned forward. "Behind you, at the bar, are 2 people you should recognize. One is Kenneth Warren, Rachel's boss. The other is Martin Loring, the CEO of your company, and Vanessa's father." Both Rachel and Brian whipped around, their faces draining of color as they spotted the 2 executives watching our table with grim expressions. "They've agreed to join us for the second part of our evening," I explained. "We'll be having a frank discussion about professional ethics, confidentiality, and the misuse of company resources." "You can't do this," Rachel whispered, panic rising in her voice. "This is my career you're destroying." "No, Rachel. You destroyed it when you chose to have an affair with a competitor's executive," I corrected her. "I'm simply ensuring that the appropriate people are aware of what happened." Brian's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger. "What do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to call off your attack dogs?" "I want something neither of you seems capable of giving," Honesty. Real, complete honesty. I gestured to the envelopes. Inside each document is a statement for you to sign. It acknowledges what you did, both professionally and personally. If you sign it right here, right now, I'll tell Kenneth and Martin that our meeting has been canceled. The other copies of these documents stay sealed. Then we proceed with our expanded dinner party, and every detail comes to light publicly. They exchange glances, the first moment of genuine connection between them since they'd arrived. No, I countered. This is the moment when you decide whether you'll finally take responsibility for your actions or continue trying to evade the consequences. Can I read it first? Rachel asked, her fingers hovering over her envelope. They both opened their envelopes and read in silence. The statements I'd prepared were detailed but fair, outlining the facts of their affair without unnecessary embellishment. The acknowledgement they were being asked to sign was similarly straightforward. They had engaged in an inappropriate relationship that violated both personal and professional boundaries, and they accepted full responsibility for their actions. Brian finished first, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. You expect me to sign this and then what? You hold it over my head forever? Once you sign, my copy and all others are destroyed, except the one you keep as a reminder. I met his gaze steadily. This isn't about ongoing punishment, Brian. It's about you finally admitting what you did, instead of hiding behind excuses and lies. Rachel was still reading, tears streaming down her face. There's so much detail here, she whispered. Dates. Times. How did you know all this? You left quite a paper trail, I replied. Hotel receipts, calendar entries, emails, text messages. Once I knew what to look for, it wasn't difficult to piece together. She looked up at me, genuine remorse in her eyes. I'll sign it. Not because you're forcing me, but because it's true. All of it. I did this. I hurt you. I betrayed our marriage and compromised my professional ethics. I'm sorry, Daniel. More sorry than you will ever know. She signed her name with a shaking hand, then pushed the document toward me. Brian watched this exchange with narrowed eyes. And what guarantees do I have that you'll keep your word? That these other copies will be destroyed? You have my word, I said simply, which, unlike yours, actually means something. His face flushed with anger, but after a moment's calculation, he too signed the document. There. Satisfied? I collected both signed statements and carefully tucked them into my jacket pocket. Then I signaled to Kenneth and Martin, giving them a brief nod. They rose from their bar stools and exited the restaurant without approaching our table. No, they were never going to, I admitted. They agreed to be present as witnesses that this meeting took place, nothing more. The rest was leverage. Not entirely, I replied. They are both fully aware of your affair and its potential ethical implications. But the additional documents I mentioned don't exist. I don't need to destroy you professionally. You've already done that yourselves. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small smile. You both lied so effortlessly for so long. I wanted to see if you would finally choose honesty when pressured, even for self-serving reasons. You signed. That's something. I stood up, dropping enough cash on the table to cover their drinks. The statements you signed are yours to keep. Do with them what you will. Tear them up, burn them, or save them as reminders of what happens when you betray the people who trust you. Rachel looked up at me, her expression a mixture of hurt and bewilderment. That's it? This was all some elaborate moral lesson? No, Rachel. This was me reclaiming my dignity. This was me refusing to be your victim or your fool any longer. I buttoned my jacket. I wish you both nothing but the exact consequences you deserve. No more, no less. As I turned to leave, Brian spoke again. For what it's worth, Hayes, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for all of it. I paused, looking back at him. Strangely enough, I believe you. But it doesn't change anything. What about us? Rachel asked quietly. Is there any chance at all for our marriage? I considered her question carefully before answering. I don't know, Rachel. What I do know is that the marriage we had is over. That relationship died in Aspen. If there's ever to be anything between us again, it would have to be something entirely new, built from the ground up with complete honesty. I'd be willing to try, she said, a glimmer of hope in her tear-filled eyes. Maybe someday, I replied, not unkindly. But not today. Today, I'm choosing myself. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them at the table with their drinks and their regrets. The mountain air was crisp and clean, filling my lungs as I took my first deep breath in what felt like weeks. I had confronted the architects of my pain. I had refused to be diminished by their betrayal. I had insisted on honesty and accountability without descending into vindictiveness or cruelty. It wasn't enough to heal the wound completely. Nothing could do that except time. But it was enough to begin the process. For the first time since discovering Rachel's infidelity, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the quiet certainty that I would be okay. As I drove home under a canopy of stars, I realized something important. True strength wasn't found in making others suffer for their wrongs against you. It was found in refusing to let their actions define your worth or determine your future. It was found in standing firmly in your own truth, even when that truth was painful. Rachel and Brian would face their own reckonings, with their employers, with their families, with their own consciences. That was no longer my concern. My focus now would be on rebuilding my life, on rediscovering the man I was beneath the identity of betrayed husband. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, dreamless and deep. The journey ahead would be challenging. I knew. Divorce proceedings, financial separations, explaining to friends and family what had happened. But I would face each step with the same clarity and purpose I'd found tonight. The worst was behind me. And whatever lay ahead, I would meet it on my own terms. Yahweh. The months following that pivotal confrontation at the restaurant passed in a blur of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and gradual adjustments to my new reality. Rachel moved out permanently, taking an apartment across town. The divorce proceedings began, civil, but emotionally draining, as 15 years of shared life was methodically dismantled into assets and liabilities on spreadsheets. In late January, almost 3 months after discovering the affair, I stood in what had been our bedroom, now stripped of Rachel's presence. Her dresser was gone, her closet empty, the framed photographs of our vacations and anniversaries removed from the walls, leaving behind pale rectangles on the paint like ghosts of happier times. I ran my hand over the bare mattress, remembering the morning rituals we'd shared here. Coffee in bed on lazy Sundays, whispered conversations in the pre-dawn light, the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. Or so I'd thought. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had warned me about these moments, when grief would ambush me unexpectedly, when the finality of loss would become tangible in ordinary objects and empty spaces. Allow yourself to feel it, she'd advised during our last session. Don't rush the grieving process or try to bypass it. You're not just losing a spouse. You're losing the future you'd imagined together, the shared history you'd built. That deserves to be mourned properly. So I sat on the edge of the mattress and allowed the grief to wash over me, not just for Rachel's betrayal, but for the innocent trust I'd lost, for the simplicity of loving without doubt. I cried, not the violent sobs of those first days, but quiet tears of acknowledgement and release. When the wave passed, I wiped my eyes and continued with the task at hand, preparing the house for sale, another decision Rachel and I had reached through our mediators. Neither of us wanted to remain in the home we'd shared. Too many memories, too much emotional residue. We would split the proceeds and truly begin anew. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Moving truck still coming at 10 tomorrow. Mark had offered his guest room while I searched for a new place of my own. Initially, I'd resisted, not wanting to impose, but he'd insisted. You were there for me during my divorce, he'd reminded me. Let me return the favor. The next day, as we loaded the last of my possessions onto the rental truck, my next-door neighbor Eleanor approached, carrying a small potted plant. A housewarming gift, she explained, pressing it into my hands. It's a peace lily, very hard to kill, even for someone with your scientific skills. Her gentle teasing brought an unexpected smile to my face. Eleanor was in her 70s, a widow who had often invited Rachel and me for tea and homemade cookies. She had tactfully avoided mentioning Rachel's absence over the past months, but her kind eyes held understanding beyond words. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, touched by her thoughtfulness. I'll miss our chats over the fence. Oh, I suspect you'll be back to visit, she said with certainty. Not this house, perhaps, but this neighborhood. You've put down roots here, Daniel. Those don't disappear overnight. Her words stayed with me as Mark and I drove across town to his place. Roots. I had indeed established connections beyond my marriage, with neighbors like Eleanor, with colleagues at school, with students whose academic journeys I'd guided over years. Those relationships remained intact, anchoring me despite the upheaval in my personal life. Life at Marks settled into a new routine. I returned to teaching full-time, finding solace in the structured environment of my classroom and laboratory. My students, perceptive as always, seemed to sense the change in me. They worked with unusual diligence, as if their academic success might somehow ease my unspoken burden. Lily Chin, the observant student who had found me in the lab that first terrible night, approached me after class one February afternoon. "Dr. Hayes," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, you seem better now. Still sad sometimes, but stronger." I was momentarily taken aback by her directness, but I appreciated her sincerity. "Thank you, Lily. I am feeling stronger. Life has its challenges, but science teaches us that transformation often follows disruption, doesn't it?" She nodded, a small smile forming. "Like how forest fires clear the way for new growth." "Exactly like that," I agreed, touched by her perfect analogy. "Now, shouldn't you be heading to calculus?" "Yes, sir. I just wanted to tell you that the science department is submitting our team for the state championships this spring. We were hoping you would consider being our faculty advisor again. Last year's team really missed your guidance." The invitation surprised me. I had stepped back from extracurricular activities during the turmoil of recent months, focusing solely on my required teaching duties. As she hurried away, I realized I'd just made my first real commitment to the future, not a legal obligation or a necessary transition, but a choice to reinvest in something I valued. It was a small step, but significant. That weekend, I received an unexpected email from Brian Donovan. My first instinct was to delete it unread, but curiosity prevailed. I've started this email a dozen times over the past months. There's no easy way to approach someone whose life you've helped damage, so I'll simply be direct. I've relocated to Seattle for a fresh start. The professional consequences of my actions were significant, as they should have been, but I've managed to find a position with a smaller company where I can rebuild my career from the ground up. My relationship with Vanessa is, understandably, over. I've also had no contact with Rachel since that night at the restaurant. That chapter is closed permanently. I'm writing not to seek forgiveness, which I have no right to expect, but to acknowledge once more the pain I caused you. Our actions were selfish and inexcusable. The way you handle the aftermath, with dignity and restraint despite your justifiable anger, has forced me to confront aspects of my character that I'd rather have ignored. I'm in therapy now, working to understand why I so callously disregarded the feelings and trust of others. It's uncomfortable work, but necessary. I wish you well, Daniel. You deserved better than what happened, and I hope life brings you healing and happiness going forward. I sat with the email for a long time, uncertain how to feel about this unexpected communication. There was no request for absolution, no self-serving agenda I could detect. Just an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and the consequences that followed. Thank you for your email. I appreciate your directness and the fact that you've sought help to address the underlying issues that led to your choices. I won't pretend that what happened hasn't profoundly changed my life, but I am working to build something new from the aftermath. I hope your fresh start in Seattle brings you clarity and better choices going forward. Short, civil, honest. I felt no need to extend further connection, but acknowledging his communication seemed like the healthy choice. Dr. Levine had emphasized repeatedly that holding on to bitterness would only hinder my own healing process. This small exchange felt like another step toward releasing the anger that had sustained me in those early days. March brought unexpected developments at school. Principal Winters called me into her office one afternoon to share surprising news. "Daniel, I wanted to let you know that we've had an unexpected resignation. Jared Peterson is leaving at the end of the semester. His wife got a job in Minneapolis." She paused, studying me carefully. "We'll be posting the science department chair position internally before looking at external candidates." The implication hung in the air between us. I'd been at Lakeside High for 12 years but had never pursued administrative positions, preferring the direct engagement with students that classroom teaching provided. "I appreciate you telling me," I said cautiously, "but I'm not sure I'd be the right fit for a leadership role right now, given the personal transitions I'm navigating." Principal Winters leaned forward, her expression kind but firm. "On the contrary, I think you'd be exactly the right fit. You have the respect of your colleagues, exceptional classroom expertise, and now, though I wouldn't wish it on anyone, you have experience with resilience through adversity." She smiled slightly. "Besides, the science team you're advising is headed to state championships for the first time in 5 years. That speaks volumes about your leadership abilities. I promised to consider the opportunity, surprised by the seed of interest that had taken root at her suggestion. A new professional challenge seemed daunting but potentially invigorating. Another chance to redefine myself beyond the identity of betrayed husband that had consumed me for months. That evening, sitting in Mark's guest room with college recommendations for my seniors spread across the bed, I found myself contemplating the many small ways my life was restructuring itself. New living arrangements, new professional possibilities, new routines and relationships forming in the wake of what had been lost. My phone rang, interrupting these reflections. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. We had communicated exclusively through lawyers and mediators since the confrontation at the restaurant, a boundary I'd established and maintained, despite her occasional attempts to engage directly. But something compelled me to answer this call. Daniel, her voice sounded different, steadier, less fragile than the last time we'd spoken. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. What do you need? I asked, not unkindly, but maintaining emotional distance. I signed the final divorce papers today, she said. They're with your attorney now. Everything's done except the judge's signature. I see. A complex wave of emotions washed through me. Relief, sadness, a strange sense of formal closure. Thank you for letting me know. There's something else, she continued. I've accepted a position with a company in Philadelphia. I'm moving at the end of the month. The news surprised me. Rachel had deep roots in our community. Family, friends, professional connections. That's a significant change. I need a fresh start, she explained. Too many people here know what happened, know what I did. I thought I could weather it, but... She paused. Also, I think it might be easier for you if I'm not constantly around, a reminder of everything that went wrong. Her consideration was unexpected. I appreciate that, but you shouldn't make life decisions. Based on trembling fingers, I opened a new browser tab and searched for the Ridgeline Hotel. It wasn't in Denver. It was a luxury resort in Aspen, 3 hours away. I called the hotel, my voice surprisingly steady, as I fabricated a story about needing to send important documents to my wife, Rachel Hayes, who was staying there for a conference. I'm sorry, sir, the receptionist replied after checking their system. We don't have anyone registered under that name. What about under Brian? Brian. I realized I didn't know his last name. Could you check for any Brians checking in today for a 5-day stay? We have a Brian Donovan who checked in this afternoon. Would you like me to connect you to his room? I sat in the dark of our home office, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. Wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, the antique desk lamp Rachel had given me for my birthday last year. The digital clock on the computer flashed 1:27 a.m. as reality crashed down upon me like a physical weight. My wife was not at a marketing conference in Denver. She was at a luxury resort with a man named Brian Donovan. I barely made it to the bathroom before violent waves of nausea overtook me. Kneeling on the cool tile floor, I emptied the contents of my stomach and then sat with my back against the bathtub, shaking uncontrollably. The bathroom spun around me, and I closed my eyes, trying to halt the vertigo. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Who was this hollow-eyed stranger looking back at me? I hardly recognized myself. Back in the office, I methodically gathered evidence. Screenshots of emails, calendar entries, the hotel confirmation I found buried in her deleted items folder. When I couldn't bear to look anymore, I searched our bedroom, finding a hidden shoebox in the back of her closet, containing hotel receipts, a prepaid phone, and a small notebook filled with dates and initials, BD. It wasn't just an affair, it was a carefully orchestrated deception that had been going on for months, possibly longer. Dawn broke through the curtains, finding me still awake, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my shattered life. I hadn't slept. I couldn't eat. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. I set the phone down without replying. What would I even say? The Daniel Hayes from yesterday, trusting, oblivious Daniel, was gone. In his place was someone new. Someone burning with questions and rage and pain so intense, it felt like my ribcage might crack open from the pressure. I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. I couldn't face my students, couldn't stand in front of a classroom and talk about chemical reactions when my entire life had just imploded. Instead, I drove aimlessly through town, past familiar landmarks that suddenly seemed alien. The coffee shop where Rachel and I had Sunday brunch. The park where we walked on summer evenings. The movie theater where we'd held hands in the dark. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and private jokes and quiet moments. Had it all been a lie? When had I become insufficient? What did Brian Donovan have that I didn't? I pulled over when the tears finally came, violent sobs that racked my body and left me gasping for air. I cried until I had nothing left, until the pain crystallized into something harder and colder, something that could sustain me through what was coming next. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of sleepless nights and chaotic thoughts. I oscillated between crushing despair and white-hot rage, between wanting to confront Rachel immediately and wanting to gather more evidence before she could construct her lies. I stopped answering her texts after sending a brief, "Busy with school stuff. Talk when you're back." Let her think everything was normal. Let her enjoy her little romantic getaway while she could. On Sunday night, I finally called my oldest friend, Mark. We'd been friends since college, and he was the only person I could trust with this. "Jesus, Dan," he said, after I'd laid out the whole sordid story. "I don't even know what to say. Are you absolutely sure? Unless there's some innocent explanation for why my wife is in a luxury hotel room with another man, instead of at the conference where she's supposed to be," I replied bitterly. "Look, I need your help. I need to know more about this guy." Mark, an IT security specialist, was quiet for a moment. "What are you planning to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I can't confront her without understanding what I'm dealing with. I need leverage, information, something." "Okay," he said reluctantly. "Send me what you have. I'll see what I can find." By Monday morning, Mark had a dossier on Brian Donovan. He was 45, divorced, a marketing executive at a competing pharmaceutical company. He'd known Rachel for approximately 2 years, initially through industry conferences. "There's more," Mark said hesitantly during our morning call. "He's engaged to someone named Vanessa Loring. They're planning a June wedding in Napa Valley." The news hit me like a physical blow. Not only was my wife cheating on me, but her lover was cheating on his fiancée. The whole thing was a tangled web of betrayal and lies. "No idea," Mark replied. "But Dan, what are you going to do with this information? Have you thought about just confronting Rachel when she gets back, maybe with a divorce lawyer already lined up?" I ran a hand through my hair, which I hadn't bothered to wash in days. "I don't know. I need to understand why. Why wasn't I enough? What does he have that I don't? This isn't about you being enough, man. This is about Rachel making terrible choices." But it felt like it was about me. About my failures. About the subtle changes in our relationship that I'd noticed but ignored. Her increasing emotional distance, her sudden interest in fitness, the night she stayed late at work or attended team-building events. I should have seen it coming. That afternoon, I received another text from Rachel. "Having dinner with the team tonight. Some exciting developments. Can't wait to tell you all about it when I'm home." The casual deception made something snap inside me. I threw my phone across the room, watching with grim satisfaction as it hit the wall and cracked. Then I grabbed my keys and drove to school. The chemistry lab was empty after hours, exactly as I needed it to be. I methodically set up a demonstration I'd planned for the next day's class, focusing on the precision of the measurements, the familiar instruments, the predictable reactions. Science made sense. It followed rules. It didn't lie or cheat or destroy 15 years of trust. I looked up to find Lily Chen, one of my advanced placement students, standing in the doorway. She was holding a textbook and looking at me with concern. "I was studying in the library. I saw the light on in here." She hesitated. "You look different." I attempted a smile. "Just preparing tomorrow's demonstration." "Did you need something?" She shook her head. "No, but is everything all right? You've never missed a class before." The genuine concern in her voice nearly undid me. Here was this 17-year-old, perceptive enough to recognize something was wrong with her teacher, while I had been too blind to see what was happening in my own marriage. "Sometimes life hands you unexpected results," I said finally. "Like in science, you have to observe, analyze, and adjust your hypothesis." She nodded slowly. "My mom says that when something hurts, it's teaching you something important." "Your mom sounds wise," I replied, touched by her awkward attempt to comfort me. "Don't worry about me, Lily. I'm just working through a complicated problem." After she left, I sat alone in the lab, surrounded by beakers and Bunsen burners, and the comforting smell of the periodic elements chart that had hung on the wall for a decade. My students believed in me. They saw me as someone stable and knowledgeable, someone who could guide them through the complexities of chemistry and, occasionally, life. What would they think if they knew how completely my world had collapsed? That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my pain crystallized into something sharper, a sense of righteous anger that burned away the fog of shock and confusion. Rachel hadn't just betrayed our marriage vows. She'd made a fool of me. She'd lied to my face repeatedly, planned her rendezvous meticulously, and expected me to remain ignorant indefinitely. And Brian Donovan, this man who was sleeping with my wife while planning a wedding with another woman, he was no better. They both deserved to face consequences for their actions. Real, life-altering consequences. And I would be the one to deliver them. The next morning, I called the school administration and requested the rest of the week off, citing a family emergency. Then I called Mark. "I need one more favor," I said when he answered. "I need to know exactly where they are right now." "Don't try to talk me out of this," I interrupted. "I'm going to Aspen. Today." Mark sighed heavily. "What's your plan here?" "Confrontation rarely ends well, especially when you're this angry." "I'm not just angry," I said, surprised by the cold steadiness of my voice. "I'm done being the oblivious husband. I'm done being lied to. Either help me or don't, but I'm going to Aspen today." After a long pause, Mark agreed. "I'll track her phone location and send you updates, but promise me you won't do anything stupid." I promised. But my definition of stupid had dramatically shifted in the past 72 hours. The drive to Aspen took just over 3 hours. 3 hours of alternating between numbness and fury, between rehearsing confrontations in my head and imagining the expression on Rachel's face when she saw me. According to Mark's tracking, Rachel and Brian were currently at a restaurant near the hotel. I'd arrived just in time for the romantic dinner. The Ridgeline Hotel was even more luxurious than its website suggested. A sprawling mountain resort with stone fireplaces and panoramic views of the snow-capped peaks. I parked my modest Honda Civic between gleaming Range Rovers and Mercedes SUVs, suddenly conscious of my rumpled appearance and the dark circles under my eyes. I hadn't shaved. I'd barely slept. I looked exactly like what I was, a man whose life had been torn apart. Inside the hotel, I approached the reception desk with a confidence I didn't feel. "Good evening," I said to the young woman behind the counter. "I'm here to surprise my wife. She's staying with Brian Donovan." The receptionist's smile froze slightly. "I'm afraid we can't give out room information without proper authorization." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Look, it's our anniversary." I drove 3 hours to surprise her with these. I pulled out the small jewelry box I'd brought, the diamond earrings I'd planned to give Rachel for Christmas. "Could you at least tell me if they're in the hotel restaurant?" Her professional resolve wavered. "The Silverleaf? Let me check if they have a reservation." She typed something into her computer. "Yes, they have a table reserved for 7:30. That's in about 20 minutes. "Thank you," I said, slipping the jewelry box back into my pocket. "You've been incredibly helpful." I found a seat in the lobby with a clear view of both the restaurant entrance and the elevators. And then I waited, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone around me could hear it. At 7:25, the elevator doors opened, and there they were. Rachel, looking more beautiful than I remembered in a dark blue dress I'd never seen before, and beside her, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a confident stride. Brian Donovan. His hand rested casually on the small of my wife's back as they walked toward the restaurant, leaning close to whisper something that made her laugh. The sound of her laughter, so carefree, so untroubled by guilt, ignited something primal inside me. Before I could reconsider, I was on my feet and moving toward them. She froze at the sound of my voice, her face draining of color as she turned to face me. "Daniel? What are you doing here?" "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing," I replied, my voice unnaturally calm despite the thundering in my chest. "Last I checked, Denver was about 100 miles east of here, and this doesn't look like a marketing conference to me." Brian Donovan stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I cut him off, not taking my eyes off Rachel. "Unless you think I misunderstood the emails, the hidden phone, the secret meetings. Tell me, how long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to my face?" Rachel's shock was morphing into panic damage control. "Daniel, please, not here. Let's go somewhere private and talk about this." "Why?" "Are you worried about making a scene? How about people knowing what you've been doing? What you both have been doing? I turned to face Brian directly. Does Vanessa know you're here? Does she know about your special project with my wife? His face blanched at the mention of his fiancée's name. Who the hell are you two? I'm the husband you've been helping her cheat on, I said, stepping closer. I'm the man who's been home alone while you've been sleeping with my wife, and right now I'm the biggest problem in your life. A small crowd was gathering around us now, hotel guests and staff, watching the unfolding drama with uncomfortable fascination. Rachel grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. No, Rachel, you've done all the embarrassing here. I shook free of her grip. 15 years of marriage, and this is what it meant to you? Secret meetings with this man who's engaged to someone else? Did you ever love me at all, or was I just convenient? Then what is it about? I demanded, my composure finally cracking. Excitement? Boredom? Was our life together so terrible that you had to create this elaborate web of lies? It wasn't like that, she insisted. Things between us haven't been right for a long time, Daniel. You're so wrapped up in your students, in your perfect little scientific world. When was the last time you really saw me? Really listened? Her attempt to shift blame ignited my fury anew. Don't you dare try to make this my fault. Whatever problems we had, we could have worked on them together. You chose this. You chose to lie. You chose to betray everything we built. A hotel manager approached us cautiously. Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to continue this conversation somewhere more private. Rachel seized the opportunity. Yes, let's go up to the room and talk, she said, clearly desperate to contain the situation. Actually, I said, turning to the manager, I'd like a room of my own for the night. It seems my wife already has accommodations. The manager nodded uncomfortably. Of course, sir, if you'll follow me to the front desk. As I turned to follow him, Brian finally spoke again. This is completely inappropriate. You can't just show up here and create a scene. I laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. Inappropriate? You're sleeping with a married woman while planning a wedding with your fiancé, and you're lecturing me about inappropriate behavior? Before he could respond, I addressed Rachel one last time. I'll be in the hotel if you decide you want to have an honest conversation for once. Otherwise, I'll see you back home, where you can pack your things and leave. With that, I walked away, my legs somehow supporting me despite the trembling in my core. Behind me, I could hear Rachel's muffled sobs and the low murmur of Brian attempting to comfort her. I checked into a small room on the opposite end of the hotel from their suite. Once alone, I collapsed onto the bed, the adrenaline of confrontation draining away and leaving me hollow. I'd imagined this moment for days, facing Rachel, making her acknowledge what she'd done. But there was no satisfaction in it, no sense of justice or vindication. Only a profound, aching emptiness where my marriage used to be. The night stretched endlessly before me, filled with memories and questions, and the terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. I awoke the next morning to insistent knocking on my hotel room door. Disoriented, I squinted at the bedside clock, 7:15 a.m. I'd finally fallen asleep around 4 o'clock after hours of staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for the signs I'd missed. The knocking continued. I dragged myself out of bed and peered through the peephole. Rachel stood in the hallway, alone, still wearing yesterday's dress, but with a cardigan thrown hastily over it. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Iba. I hesitated before opening the door. Did I even want to hear what she had to say? Would any explanation make a difference now? Finally, I opened the door, but blocked the entrance with my body. What do you want, Rachel? Can I come in, please? Her voice was hoarse, her eyes red-rimmed. I need to explain. Explain what? That it's not what it looks like? Because we both know that's a lie. She flinched. I owe you the truth. The whole truth. After that, if you still want me to leave, I will. I stepped aside silently, allowing her to enter. The room was small, with just a queen bed, a desk, and a single armchair by the window. Rachel took the chair while I sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining distance between us. You left last night. After everything happened. She twisted her wedding ring nervously, the ring I'd saved for months to buy when we were both just starting our careers, full of hope for our future together. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. And yet you meticulously planned it, I replied. The fake conferences, the secret phone, the hidden calendar entries. That doesn't sound like something that just happened. She looked down at her hands. The first time was an accident. We were at an actual conference in Boston last year. We'd been working on a joint project between our companies. There was alcohol, compliments, attention. So it's been going on for over a year? The revelation was like a fresh wound opening inside me. Rachel nodded miserably. At first I told myself it was just a one-time mistake, that I'd end it and you'd never have to know. But then you decided to keep seeing him, I finished for her. To keep lying to me day after day. I felt trapped, she whispered, between the guilt of what I'd done and the excitement of how he made me feel. You and we became so comfortable, so routine. Brian made me feel alive again, desired, important. Her words cut deeper than any knife. And I didn't make you feel those things? Not for a long time, she admitted. We stopped really seeing each other years ago, Daniel. We became roommates who occasionally had sex. You were so focused on your students, your science competitions. I tried to talk to you about feeling disconnected, but you always dismissed it as a rough patch. I wanted to deny it, to throw her words back at her, but a small part of me recognized the truth in what she was saying. We had grown apart. I had taken our relationship for granted, assumed it would always be there, solid and unchanging like a scientific constant. You could have insisted we get counseling, I said. You could have told me how unhappy you were. You could have left me. Instead, you chose to deceive me, to make me look like a fool. I know, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, and I hate myself for it. I didn't know how to fix us, and then this thing with Brian started. And it was easier to live in denial than face the truth about our marriage. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, to put physical distance between us. And what about his fiancée? Did you ever think about her? About how this would destroy her too? Her face crumpled. He told me they were separated, that the engagement was essentially over, just not publicly announced yet. Fresh tears formed in her eyes. God, I'm such an idiot. He was lying to me too. I laughed bitterly. Quite the foundation of honesty you two built together. For a long moment, we sat in heavy silence, the wreckage of our marriage strewn between us like shattered glass. Finally, Rachel spoke again, her voice small. The question hung in the air between us. Could I forgive her? Even if I could, would our marriage ever recover from this? Or would every anniversary, every business trip, every late night at work become a trigger for suspicion and resentment? I don't know, I answered honestly. Right now, I can barely look at you without seeing you with him. Without imagining all the lies you told me so casually. She nodded, accepting this. What do you want me to do? Should I move out? Yes, I said without hesitation. I need space. I need time to figure out what I want. What I can live with. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay with my sister when we get back. I'll give you all the space you need. I walked to the window, looking out at the majestic mountains surrounding the resort. They seemed so solid, so permanent, everything my marriage had turned out not to be. There's one more thing, I said, turning back to face her. I want you to tell me everything. Every meeting, every lie, every detail. Not to hurt me more, but because I deserve to know the full truth if I'm ever going to make an informed decision about our future. And so, in that anonymous hotel room, my wife confessed her year-long affair in excruciating detail. The initial flirtation, the first stolen kiss, the elaborate deceptions they'd constructed to be together. With each revelation, another piece of our shared history was rewritten, tainted by the knowledge of her parallel life with Brian Donovan. When she finally finished, the morning had stretched into afternoon. She looked exhausted, hollowed out by her confessions. I felt strangely calm, as if I'd been immunized against further pain by the sheer volume of betrayal I'd absorbed. Thank you for your honesty, I said formally, as if speaking to a stranger. Finally, Rachel stood, swaying slightly with fatigue. I should go pack. Our checkout time is at 4. One last thing, I said, reaching for my jacket. Brian. Does he love you? Has he promised to leave Vanessa for you? She flinched as if I'd struck her. He says he loves me. But no, he hasn't talked about leaving her. He says it's complicated, because of family business connections. Convenient, I remarked. So you were willing to destroy our marriage for someone who wasn't willing to do the same for you. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. I wasn't thinking about the future. I was just living in the moment, I supplied. Well, congratulations. This is your moment now. Enjoy it. After Rachel left, I sat alone in the room, turning my wedding ring around and around on my finger. For 15 years, I'd worn it proudly, this symbol of our commitment and love. Now it felt like a reminder of my blindness, my failure. I slipped it off and held it in my palm, feeling its weight. Then I closed my fist around it, squeezing until the metal bit into my skin. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The paralyzing shock and betrayal that had defined the past few days began to transmute into something else, something harder and more purposeful. Rachel and Brian had treated their affair like a game, carelessly gambling with other people's lives and hearts. They'd felt entitled to their deception, justified in their betrayal. I put my wedding ring back on, not as a symbol of my marriage anymore, but as a reminder of what I had lost and what I was determined to reclaim. My dignity, my self-respect, and a future defined by my choices, not Rachel's betrayal. I need Vanessa Loring's contact information, I said when he answered, and I need to know everything about Brian Donovan's professional life. Who he works with, who his boss is, everything. Nothing illegal, I assured him, just a reckoning. Everyone deserves to know the truth, don't you think? This isn't about revenge, I interrupted. It's about justice. It's about consequences for actions. It's about making sure that Rachel and Brian don't get to simply walk away from the destruction they've caused. After ending the call, I opened my laptop and began to write, documenting everything I'd learned in meticulous detail. Dates, locations, communications. The scientist in me approached it methodically, organizing the evidence of betrayal into a comprehensive record. As the afternoon light shifted across the mountains outside my window, I worked steadily, plotting each step with the same precision I brought to my laboratory demonstrations. By the time I checked out of the hotel, I had everything mapped out, a carefully calibrated sequence of events that would ensure Rachel and Brian faced the full consequences of their choices. The drive home was different from the frantic journey to Aspen. Now I moved with purpose, my mind clear and focused on what lay ahead. The pain was still there, a constant ache beneath my breastbone, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it fueled my resolve. Rachel had texted that she'd arranged a flight back and would be staying with her sister Emily for the time being. Good. I needed the house to myself for what came next. When I arrived home late that night, I went directly to Rachel's home office. I had already discovered her primary cache of evidence, but now I searched more thoroughly, uncovering additional hotel receipts, gifts from Brian, and a journal filled with entries about their relationship. Each discovery should have wounded me further, but instead, I felt a grim satisfaction in adding to my documentation. The next morning, I called the school and requested an additional week of leave, citing family issues. The principal, who had known me for over a decade, heard something in my voice that prevented further questions. "Take whatever time you need, Daniel," she said. "Your classes are covered. Just focus on taking care of yourself." For the next 3 days, I barely left the house. I slept in the guest room, unable to face our marital bed. I ate mechanically when my body demanded it, and I worked on my plan, refining and expanding it, considering every possible contingency. On Sunday evening, Vanessa Loring agreed to meet me for coffee after a series of cryptic text messages in which I claimed to have important information about her fiancé. She arrived at the small cafe 20 minutes from her home, looking apprehensive, a tall woman with straight blonde hair and intelligent eyes. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked, approaching my table cautiously. "You said this was about Brian?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Thank you for coming, Miss Loring. Please, sit down. What I have to tell you isn't easy to hear, but I believe you deserve to know the truth." "You're scaring me," she said, remaining standing. "Is Brian okay? Has something happened?" "He's fine," I assured her. "Physically, at least." "Please, sit. I promise this will make sense in a moment." She sat reluctantly, her back rigid with tension. "All right, I'm listening." "My name is Daniel Hayes," I began. "Until last week, I believed I was in a happy marriage with my wife of 15 years, Rachel. Then I discovered she's been having an affair for the past year." "With your fiancé, Brian Donovan?" The color drained from Vanessa's face. That's not possible. Brian wouldn't." I slid a folder across the table. "I'm sorry, but he would, and he has been. Everything is documented here. Dates, locations, emails, including their most recent trip to the Ridgeline Hotel in Aspen, which ended when I confronted them 3 days ago.